Welcome back, everybody, to All About America's Team. And we got a primetime episode tonight and a very special guest. We're here with Mario Powers Up. He's joined us to talk about some Dallas Cowboys football facing the Green Bay Packers. So let's just right into it. Mario, introduce yourself and give us your favorite Cowboys moment growing as you followed the team.
What's up, everybody? Owen Ray, thanks again for having me on. I'm excited to be on here with you guys. Um, my name is Mario. You can find me on Twitter, Mario's Powers Up. I'm always throwing out stats, sometimes some funny stuff, sometimes some Marvel Avengers stuff. Kind of an all-around guy. As far as my favorite Cowboys moment, I have to go back way back. I don't know how old you guys are. You guys look young. I'm I'm 35 years old, right? So I remember some games from way back when, and one of the first games that I remember actually watching was the '92 NFC Championship game against 49ers. So biggest moment in that game, it was a close game. Cowboys were up by three in the waning minutes of the fourth quarter, and they faced a big third down. And Troy Aikman hits Alvin Harper on a slant pass, and he takes it 60 some yards into San Francisco territory, and then Cowboys end up getting the game sealing touchdown. So that's that's the oldest memory for me, and I really enjoy that one because that is what kicked off the dynasty of the '90s.
Yeah, I definitely was not alive for that. I mean, I was born in 2001, so a few years after. But I do have a DVD set and of like the greatest Cowboys games, and that's one of those games, and I do remember that. And I think there's a report. I could be wrong, but Irvin was annoyed because Troy kept throwing it to Harper, and so he told Harper, "Hey, you line up at this, at the X for this play or something." And then sure enough, the play he was open, where Irvin usually runs his route at the outside. He went into the slot and Harper moved outside, and then sure enough, Troy hit Harper instead of Irvin for that pass. I don't know if that's true. I think I read that somewhere, but that I just thought I do
No,
I do I do remember watching that play on that disc, so that's actually pretty cool. But yeah, we're really excited to have you on, and let's get right into some Cowboys football. As always, Owen, you have any breaking news since we last spoke a couple hours ago?
Well, while you and I were talking last, Terrell Basham was added to the 53-man roster, which everyone kind of expected after Tristan Hill was cut. And it was good to see that he's back. He pictures were taken in practice, and from the pictures he looked good. So the full practice report, Anthony Barr was the only player to not practice. Hopefully we'll see in the next few weeks, but for whatever reason, it's with a hamstring injury, so hopefully that was just like a veteran rest to see if he can fully practice tomorrow or be limited. And then Noah Brown and Zeke are both limited, and so is Donovan Wilson, but everyone else is full as of right now. Zeke, there are some reports that say that he's going to play no matter what. There are others that say that they're going to see how he feels with his knee. Personally, even if he's 99%, I'd rest him because 2 weeks ago you saw the running game was pretty fine without him. Noah Brown, hopefully he'll be able to, but if he's not able to go, hopefully we'll see more of Turpin in the passing game. And then Donovan Wilson with a tooth injury, so he'll be fine. But with the Packers, David Bakhtiari with the knee did not practice. Devondre Campbell, who is either their leading tackler or their second in with tackles, he did not practice. Rashawn Gary, like we talked about earlier, he is out for the season. So if you just look at the injury report based off of two teams, Dallas definitely has the leg up on the Packers. And what are y'all's thoughts on that?
But Packers are in shambles right now,
Yeah.
definitely, and it's not just their season that's getting salted away. The injuries they add insult to injury, right? So I think the biggest one for them definitely is losing Rashawn Gary to the torn ACL in this past game, because he is their biggest pass rushing threat. And the Packers, their their rankings on defense are a little bit misconceiving. They're kind of like the Cowboys in a way, where they're really good against the pass. They're ranked second in yards per game against the pass this season, but they're ranked 26th against the run. So Rashawn Gary's a good pass rusher, but he is also very effective in run support for them. So Dallas should be able to run the ball effectively, um, especially with all these injuries that the Packers have. So we'll see what they're able to do with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I think what really stood out is that the Packers offensive line being pretty banged up. I know Bakhtiari did play last week. He didn't look great out there. He looked a little slow, definitely banged up. So if he's not able to go, even if he is able to go, he does not look the same. I know he's been battling lower body injuries the last multiple years, so definitely a lot harder for offensive linemen dealing with a lower body injury. So, I mean, even if he's out there, I feel like he'll be a liability for them, and especially keeping Aaron Rodgers upright will be key for them in this game, especially with all the talent that Dallas has, rushing the passer with Parsons and Marcus Lawrence, and all the other guys that they have rushing. So I mean, I definitely think that if they're Bakhtiari is not able to go, then it'll be a lot easier for the Cowboys to rush the passer and get to Aaron Rodgers. But even if he's out there, I still think that they'll probably target him a lot more. Another thing, you mentioned Turpin getting some playing time. I do hope he does see the field on offense. He's had so many solid returns, being just like one more block away from breaking one for a touchdown. I feel like with his speed, there's definitely a lot of ways that they can utilize him without giving him the ball with a reverse, which is Owen's least favorite play call that the Cowboys run. So I feel like getting him on some a swing pass maybe out of the backfield or a quick slant, just anything to get him the ball on offense, because I mean the Cowboys, while they are still having success throwing the ball, they are still lacking there, and we'll kind of talk about them lacking receiver a little bit later on. But I think that he could definitely contribute on offense, so it would be nice to see what he can do, especially in this game with the Packers being a pretty solid pass defense team. But that's kind of all I have in regards to the injury report.
Yeah, another thing that I noticed was that 3 of the Packers wide receivers are on the injury report: Romeo Doubs, Sammy Watkins, and Watson, and then also Aaron Jones. So 4 of their key offensive starters hopefully will be able to play, but as of right now, it does not look great. And obviously the bye week was last week. And Mario, what are your thoughts on basically this is the best week for everyone to be healthy, given Micah ran 90 yards on one play alone for the touchdown. So how impactful do you think the bye week will be?
I think the bye week definitely came at a right time, because one thing about the Cowboys last season, and the reason they were able to finish 12-5 and get into the playoffs, is because they were a relatively healthy team. The NFL's a tough sport, man, and guys get hurt, and most of the time guys are injured and not even on the injury report. They say after the first week of training camp, nobody's 100%, right? So we were really fortunate last season to not have too many major injuries. And this year, I think that luck is sort of running out and it's caught up. Obviously, week 1 with our QB1 Dak Prescott going down. Arguably the best player on our team, Micah Parsons, dealing with that groin injury. Jaron Kearse had a knee. Donovan Wilson's been nicked up here and there. Got guys on the defensive line that have been in and out of the rotation. Our linebackers, it's just we're not immune to the injury bug this season. So there was a lot of guys on the injury report prior to the Bears game. So I do think that the bye week came at the right time for everybody to heal up a little bit and get healthy coming into a big game on the road in Lambeau Field.
Yeah, for sure. And I also think before Ray, I get your thoughts. I think that it also helped guys like James Washington, who hopefully his 21-day practice window will be put into effect next week. So hopefully he'll be able to play because he will be needed. I know there are a bunch of videos in training camp where he was either making a really nice play or he was down way longer than a healthy player should be. So hopefully he'll be able to come and make an impact. And I know several Steelers fans that were upset that they did not retain him. And obviously he was not he didn't get a lot of snaps there, but when he made the most of his opportunities, so hopefully that'll be able to translate to Dallas. But Ray, what are your thoughts on the bye week?
Yeah, I think another thing that's kind of ignored when it comes to the bye week is the timing of the team's bye. I know some teams get the lower end of the stick, getting their bye week 4 or 5, and I mean I think Dallas being able to have their bye towards the middle of the season, that it just like you said, Mario, shortens the margin of error for guys to go down and get hurt. If you're losing guys in week 3 or week 4, and your bye's already passed, then I mean nobody or people are getting nicked up after week 5 or week 4, whenever you have it. There's not that additional week of rest until the postseason if you do make it. So having it kind of middle of the week gives a lot of guys who are nicked up, injured, to kind of sit and get a breather. Is super beneficial, I think. But yeah, I mean bye week's always good. I mean Zeke getting nicked up with that knee injury and then sitting out last week, getting the bye week, and then also I think he will play, but I don't think he'll practice very much. So having 2.5 weeks just of not practicing, hard wear and tear in the knee, I think that's going to do a lot of good, especially with an injury like that.
Yeah,
I agree with your logic on the timing of the bye week, because if you really think about it, middle of the season is when a lot of teams, what you are on offense and on defense, and you get the coaches sort of get like a middle of season review on how they want to handle the other half of the season. So when you have your bye week in the middle of the year, that's very beneficial, and it just helps coaches in that regard. Because like you said, you have your bye week 4. I mean, you don't even know what kind of team you are at that point. Yeah. After only 3 games, and if you have your bye week like some of these teams in week 13 or 14, it's almost like you're playing an entire season without a break. So I'm really glad that the schedule makers gave the Cowboys a bye week in the middle of the year this season.
Yeah, Jerry must have thrown a little bit extra on the table when they were making the schedules, but
well, especially after these back-to-back Thursdays that Dallas always plays, where they play like 3 games in less than 15 days. I think that it was good. Now, moving on, this is probably the biggest free agency news that Dallas has had in a few seasons. You have players like Micah, Zeke, Michael Irvin, or former player Michael Irvin, Dez, and Jerry, all trying to get Odell Beckham. Twitter has been going insane over the idea of Odell being a Cowboy, and there was even a Browns reporter that tweeted, Odell, don't comment on this tweet if you're going to come back to the Browns, and he went off he's like hello, because obviously he does not want to go back to the Browns. But Mario, what are your thoughts on Odell? Do you think he's going to be signed? And if they do sign him, what type of impact do you think that he will have on the Cowboys? And probably this year and longer, because he does want a multi-year deal for like $12.5 million is what I heard.
Well, based on the history of this organization, I'm not going to get my hopes up right now that he will be signed. They don't. Jerry loves these big personality splash players, right? Jerry's not in charge anymore. I think it's pretty obvious over the past few years. Steven has taken over. Steven and Will McClay make a really good team in that front office. And if you notice, Jerry just just the way he acts, the interviews he gives, the erratic statements he makes, any chance he gets when he gets on the radio on 105.3 The Fan. I feel like that's because he doesn't have that voice in behind closed doors anymore. So he's like tries to take advantage of any chance he gets to get what he wants to say out there. So he definitely wants Odell, and he's the one that's pushing for him. And I haven't even heard any type of quote from Steven at all about the Odell Beckham situation. You know, whether a yes or no or a neutral or we're looking into it or nothing at all. It's all Jerry. So I'm not hopeful for that. Also, because how you mentioned what it is that OBJ wants, and he wants a multi-year deal, and I don't think the Cowboys are going to give him a multi-year deal coming off his second ACL injury. They're definitely not going to give him any guaranteed money. And if you look at all the other options that OBJ possibly has, why would he agree to an incentive-laden deal for only the rest of this season when there are other teams out there that could give him a lot closer to what he wants, is such as the Chiefs, who I know they just traded for Kadarius Toney, but he has a big injury history. Chiefs got to keep pace with the Bills in the AFC. The Bills, they have Gabe Davis and, of course, Stephon Diggs and Isaiah McKenzie, who's been hit or miss this season, so they could use a wide receiver 3 of his caliber. I do think the Packers are probably ruled out for OBJ just because of the way their season's going. He wants to go to a contender. And for the same reasons, I think going back to the Rams is out as well. So I don't want to get excited at all about OBJ wearing a Cowboys jersey until we get a little more clarification on that.
Yeah, for sure. Ray, what are your thoughts on the matter? I know that you were itching to talk about it like 11 o'clock a.m., so I'm sure that you have a novel full of things to talk about here.
Well, honestly, I'm right up there with you in regards of thinking that Odell is probably not going to make it to Dallas, and we're not going to see him in a uniform. Just mainly, like you said, the track record of the last few years where there have been these big time free agents with Von Miller and Bobby Wagner. I know years back when Ramsey was on the table, and all these players, they've been moving around, and the Cowboys have just kind of stayed in their lane, didn't want to take any big chances on aging players. And I mean, Odell fits that category, and he also has an injury history, like you said. But I mean, I do think that if the Cowboys were to sign him, I think he would be beneficial this season. I mean, even last year, coming off an injury, once he got to the Rams and got a few games under his belt, he was a huge contributor in the postseason. And really, I mean, I think the Rams would have won a lot more, like a lot easier, if he had not gotten hurt mid-game, because it kind of really messed up their wide receiving core, and the Bengals were able to adjust and really give the attention to Cooper Kupp that they needed to do up until that last drive. So, I mean, he's definitely still a really solid player, and I do think he can be a wide receiver 2, maybe even a wide receiver 1, depending on what team he would end up landing on. I just don't think that it will be the Cowboys, just because the Cowboys have never. It's been a long time since they've grabbed a mid-season caliber or a mid-season player to the caliber of an Odell Beckham Jr. So I don't see it happening.
I agree. I do like, Mario, how you said that Stephen Jones runs things. I've talked to Ray about how I think that Stephen runs things, and Ray was like, no, it's all Jerry. And Jerry's made a lot of comments that he's like, I want to do everything. Like 2 weeks ago, he wanted to sell every draft pick for someone. And obviously that's not how Stephen rolls. Just one comment on Stephen, then I'll go in. I think that Stephen, Dallas a few years ago was one of the worst teams cap-wise, and I think that really bothered Stephen. I don't think that he's going to do anything to trap himself. Dallas, I think, is second in cap space to the Browns, maybe. So I think that that's where he wants to stay, because you have guys like CD who can get an extension this offseason. Micah Parsons is not going to be cheap. You have Dak, who you're probably going to have to re-sign in the next 2 to 3 years. Trayvon Diggs is going to want a contract. So there's a lot of players that, and then obviously the amount of free agents in this specific draft class is a lot. Your right tackle is a free agent, so I think that Stephen Jones is really working on that. But this is the first time, at least, Zeke talked very highly about getting Odell, which I don't think players have really talked about getting a guy like that for some time. And if I'm wrong, please correct me. But Jerry has really been talking about him. Michael Irvin said that OBJ has wanted to be here for years. His family's here. So if it does happen, then that'd be great. I know that there have been, for the past like 4 or 5 seasons, there's just so many photoshopped of OBJ in a Cowboys jersey. So it'd be nice to be able to see the real deal if it actually happens. But I do think that there are just so many other teams. And I think that the Chiefs, if they do get him, the Bills, I don't know if their quarterback is any Tommy John or what he's gonna need. So we'll see what happened, because it was a UCL pitcher-like injury, Josh Allen, and it was insane that even after he had that injury on that Hail Mary, he still threw the ball 70 yards, which I thought was a question. I thought that Sauce was tugging a little bit, but that's not a comment for right now. But I was like, wow. And then to hear later that his UCL, I was like, he's insane. So I think that if that injury is really as bad as people think it is, then the Chiefs getting him will cement themselves as the best team in the AFC. And with how shaky the NFC is, the Chiefs only getting better is going to make the NFC lives a whole lot more difficult. So next up, any other rebuttals to what I said?
Well, no, I agree with you, and I think anywhere Odell goes, he can still potentially be dangerous,
Yeah.
and I don't want to be misunderstood on that front either. Just because I don't believe he will be a Cowboy doesn't mean I don't want him to be a Cowboy.
Yeah.
I really do think that he can help this wide receiver core, and there's a lot of arguments of, well, you don't know what he has left in the tank. He's coming off injury. Well, James Washington's coming off injury too. Noah Brown has a foot injury. We know a foot injury for a wide receiver spells death a lot of times. That's really what sent Dez's career in a downward spiral. So who do we have after that? We can't rely on the rookie Jalen Tolbert. He is just not catching on, which is really disappointing. So I think Odell can come in and be our wide receiver 3 and be better than any of the guys in that room, not named CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup, and give us that splash player who can go and go get the football, because CeeDee Lamb hasn't really shown us that he can be that guy. He can get open, he can make plays, but when it comes down to 50-50 balls, he usually loses. Michael Gallup is a toe tap magician on the sideline, right? We know that. But even he's struggling a little bit with recovering from his knee injury from last year. So we talked about, cap space and that kind of stuff, and the difference between Jerry and Steven. And I think that's one of the trickiest parts about being a Cowboys fan, is that, Jerry is the gunslinger, and he would go and spend all the money and forget the cap, kind of Ram style, F them picks, and Steven is like the complete opposite extreme. And it would be nice to be somewhere in the middle, and for them to recognize that the NFC is weak this year, like you mentioned, Owen, and now's the time to strike. So, and especially with all of the in-house free agents that we're going to lose a lot of players next season. This team is going to potentially look drastically different. So if there's any time to strike, it's now. And we know Dallas was interested in a receiver. They recognized their own deficiencies because they were pushing hard for Brandon Cooks. And it didn't come out of Cowboys camp, but it came from other sources that they were also trying to trade for Jerry Jeudy. So we know that they are trying to upgrade their wide receiver room because they're not happy with what they have. And OBJ, I think, will do that. So like I said, I'm not gonna get my hopes up. If it happens, I will be elated, but I'll wait till that day.
Yeah, I do agree. I think it would be nice. And yeah, I do agree with CD. Sometimes he can take himself out of plays. I know that Ray was talking about the late interception, where in the Eagles game where Cooper Rush just threw where CD was open, but Rush underthrew it, and then CD kind of just dodged out of the way. And I didn't see that on at first looking at it, but watching it again, you could see that he kind of just took himself out of that play. So hopefully in the next, well, it's difficult for a guy when you haven't had your quarterback one, you haven't played with him for a full year. But I don't think that excuse is not a good one. But hopefully they'll do like we all agree what's best for the team. But I don't think any of us really think it'll happen. But even guys like Zeke were like, I think that players realize that this year, out of any year, is probably the year that they have the best shot to win it. Because the Eagles, they're probably going to have a top 10 pick. They're gonna only going to get better, and hopefully they do sign Hurts, because I think that'll be the one guy that'll hold them back with his arm. But I think that this year is the year to do it, and hopefully they do make some noise. But Mario, I'm curious. Who are out of both the Packers and the Cowboys? Who are your players to watch on both sides of the ball?
Well, let's start with Dallas. On the offensive side of the ball, I'm gonna stick with a hot hand, and I'm gonna say Tony Pollard, man. Um, like you mentioned earlier, Zeke is it looks like he's trending towards playing, but I'm hearing a lot of the same statements that I heard before he sat out of the Bears game. So, not that we take any game lightly, but the Packers are 3-6. They've lost 5 straight. There's a huge game coming up the following week in Minnesota, for a team who is 7-1 right now, could potentially face a Bills team without Josh Allen. So they might be 8-1 when Dallas goes up there to Minnesota. So I think another week of rest for Zeke would be good. And if that's the case, then it's Tony Pollard show again against the 26th ranked Green Bay rush defense. So I look for Pollard to have a good game on the offensive side. On the defensive side, and this goes hand in hand with my Packers pick, so I guess we could just call this a matchup. So Packers offense, I think it's easy to point at Aaron Jones if he plays, or Alan Lazard, who is Packers wide receiver 1 this season in most categories. I'm looking at Sammy Watkins, who's coming back from injury. So he's a big guy. He's 6'1", 211, and if the scheme holds true for the Cowboys, Trayvon's probably going to cover Lazard most of the game, and that's going to leave Sammy Watkins on Anthony Brown. Anthony Brown has played solid, but we've seen him have some struggles. So that would be an interesting matchup. Sammy Watkins is somebody who has speed to get deep. He's got the big body for those intermediate routes, put himself between the ball and the defender. I think, especially if Aaron Jones is out, Rodgers is probably going to be looking his way if Lazard is matched up on Diggs. So that'd be a good matchup to see. On defense for the Packers, they lost a lot of guys, and they lost their best pass rusher in Rashawn Gary last week to an ACL tear. I think somebody you got to look out for, and he's kind of been under the radar a little bit this season, and that's their defensive tackle, Kenny Clark. He is a disruptor in the middle. When Dallas has had some issues in pass protection, it has been up the middle. The Oddish has held his own, but it's been more like miscommunications. So Kenny Clark, actually, he has 2 sacks on the season. He has 5 tackles for loss, 5 quarterback hits. So he has been disruptive. There is one caveat to that matchup, and that's the fact that all those stats that I just gave you for Kenny Clark came in the first 3 games. Since then, he does not have a sack, he does not have a quarterback hit, and he does not have a tackle for loss. if you look at his snap percentage, it's up in the 80s every single game. So he might be wearing down. Just the fact that the Packers have so many injuries, he's having to play so much, and that spells good news for Dallas in the interior of their O line. So hopefully we get the past 6 game versions of Kenny Clark and not the first 3 game versions, because he is a disruptor and that might be a problem.
Yeah, I had Kenny Clark written down as well. Ray, what about you? Who are your players to watch?
I have I'm going to start with CeeDee Lamb. I think as being the wide receiver one, I think it's very crucial that he is consistent this game. Just to backtrack a little bit and kind of stay on track, but just go back a little bit. I mean, CeeDee Lamb, Owen did mention that he's been I'm one of his biggest critics. I do think that CeeDee Lamb has a lot of talent. What's hard for him is he comes in the same draft class as a Justin Jefferson, who from his rookie year has really put the league on a storm, and putting Justin Jefferson's numbers next to CD's, it leaves a lot to desire. And Owen did said he hasn't played with Dak for full season yet, but I mean that's what the off season's for. That's where you build your rapport, you watch tape, you get in the same wavelength, and he just has not been consistent. So, I mean, this is kind of that year where I'm really all right, time to pick it up. I do want to see him, be more on that wavelength of an 7 catches upwards, because so far he just hasn't really been that type of guy that you can put next to a Devontae Adams or a Tyreek Hill or a D-Hop. He's just kind of in that, I guess, limbo in between a top tier number 1 guy and then your number 2. There's that limbo, and that's where CeeDee Lamb is. So I'd like to see him, be a little bit more consistent. He might be on Jair Alexander. Alexander usually doesn't travel with the number 1, but I mean, it's a little bit more of an interesting scenario where, Michael Gallup also has not come back fully and been the Michael Gallup that we're used to expecting. So we might see Jair Alexander on CD a little bit more this game. So it'll be interesting to see how he performs up against Alexander if he does match up. So that'll be interesting to see. My other one, I'm going to go with the rookie left tackle, Tyler Smith. He had a little rough patch, but he looked good last week. So it'll be interesting to see how he goes up against the Packers defensive line, whoever they have out there going pass rushing on him. He's that guy that I think is the weakest part of the offensive line. That's not his fault. I just think that Terrence Steele has played really well, and then the interior with Zach Martin being down there, he's the most consistent player on the team. So you're going to get from Zach Martin every single week. So that left tackle has kind of been being the blind side of Dak Prescott. That's kind of the scariest part of the line for me. So we'll see how he holds up. And then my third player to watch is Aaron Rodgers. He's not played well at all this year. So it'll be interesting to see if this is kind of that catapults him back up to where he usually is. I think he's almost at the point where he's doubling or tripling his interception totals of the last 2 or 3 seasons. So we'll see if he can get back on track. I know the wide receiver talent has probably added to his down year. I know he's been very critical of his wide receivers publicly, which that's a completely different story to get into. But Sammy Watkins is coming back. He's bounced around pretty much everywhere, and he's always been a guy where he'll be there for 2 weeks and then he'll disappear with an injury, hamstring most likely, come back, go disappear again. So we'll see if he's able to make it through the entirety of the game. He would be a big upgrade because he adds speed. He adds speed to that offense and at the wideout position. But yeah, so think this is kind of that game where Aaron Rodgers has to kind of snap out of it, because they're, like you said, Mario, they're running out of games, and being on a five game win streak, the Vikings are, I think they have a 4 or 5 game lead right now, so I don't even think they can salvage the division at this point. But I mean, just fighting for wild card is probably their best bet. And right now, if they lose one more game or even 2, they're kind of out of it. So this is kind of a must win for the Packers, I think. And Aaron Rodgers is going to be, if they're going to win, it's going to have to be because of Aaron Rodgers, and he has the caliber to do that. We just haven't seen it at any point this year.
Yeah. I agree with both of you. And to piggyback off what you said, Ray, with how important this game is, Dallas, I think these next 2 games are probably the most critical on their stretch, because, like you said, if the Packers do figure it out, unless the Vikings just fall off, both of those teams could potentially be playoff teams, and then you're probably going to have 2 teams from the East, unless the Eagles fly off or unless the Giants just keep on winning games. So I think that, especially going up against 2 NFC teams, I think it's a must win for both teams. So just a few players that I wrote down. Jair Alexander, who we talked about, was only allowed 207 yards according to Pro Football Reference. So hopefully, whoever he faces hopefully they'll be able to hold their own. Their running backs, the Packers, whoever they do throw out there, hopefully just the Cowboys will be able to have hopefully they'll be able to play well against the run. Hankins, like you and I, Ray and I talked about earlier this morning, when Hankins was on the field against the Bears only had 11 rushes for 39 yards, and he only played 42% of the snaps. So hopefully he plays more this upcoming game. And I assume that that's just him getting into becoming 100% comfortable with the system. And then also the issue with going third on these topics is that all my guys are going to be picked. So the one guy that has not been talked about is Preston Smith. He had 3.5 sacks so far, and I think that he's probably your best just straight up pass rusher now that Gary's out. And if I were the Packers, I would probably line him up against Tyler Smith, just because the last 2 weeks he's probably been his worst. The Lions game was not pretty from either tackle, and then the Bears game, they traded their best pass rushers, so I'm not really going to put much stock in that game. But hopefully, Tyler Smith getting a week off, having the bye will help him. And also, one thing that we haven't talked about, which I should have mentioned earlier, Tyron Smith was in the building earlier today, so hopefully he'll be able to be back by December or be able to make a playoff push if Dallas does end up making the playoffs. And Mario, later in the show, I'm going to ask you, I want to get your thoughts on how the offensive line should shift if Tyron Smith does come back. And one guy that we haven't talked about who was just signed today, Jonathan Abrams. The Raiders have had so many first-round picks, and they've cut all of them. So Jonathan Abrams, he did have talent. I know that Dallas, I think Dallas was linked to him before Dallas traded their first-round pick to the Raiders. So I think that Abrams, any guy that's a first-round pick that gets cut middle of the season, is going to have a chip on his shoulder. I don't think that he's going to come out and have the best game of his career, but I do think that he does add talent to that safety room and adds depth. And who knows how much he's going to play, if at all. But it's just another guy for Dak to have to watch out for. And then Devondre Campbell, if he does play, he's ranked 25th in total tackles with 64, and he's either first or second for the team. So if you can stay away from him, that'll probably be best. But Mario, what are your keys to victory for Dallas?
Well, on the offense, I think obviously, and it's not rocket science. You got to run the football, all right? But beyond running the football, I think the main reason you need to be effective is to not get in these third and long situations. We saw what happened with the Bears and how effective the offense was because they were able to run the football. Getting into these there's a reason the Cowboys had the best third down percentage game of the year against Chicago, and that's because they weren't being forced into these third and sevens and eights and nines. And I would like to see Kellen Moore call the game relatively the same that he did versus Chicago, because it worked. And I hope he doesn't start this reverse psychology on himself where he's going to start, calling a pass every first down and getting behind the chains. And because on the road against an opponent like Aaron Rodgers and the Packers, that's a recipe for disaster. So as far as the defense side of the ball, I also think the defense needs to win third down. And Aaron Rodgers, if you allow him to keep extending drives, that's when he gets into a groove. And regardless of the weapons that he has or does not have on the offense right now, he's not the guy that you want to allow to get hot, right? Especially after a few weeks of the paltry play that he's had. I know you mentioned earlier, Ray, that he's on pace for like tripling his interception total over the past few seasons. And if you go look at his stats as of week 8, he is on pace for like his lowest totals for in many statistical categories: completion percentage, quarterback rating, QBR, interceptions thrown, even yards, total yards thrown for the season. So this is not his best year, and we definitely don't want to give him any type of spark to ignite that fire once again against us this Sunday.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So
one thing that I'm Ray, you take it.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I mean, we've pretty much been on the same wavelength for pretty much every point so far. But I'll just definitely running the football. That's my key. Every time we do a keys to victory, my first thing that I always say is Cowboys have to run the football well. Because like you said, it keeps the third down, third and medium, third and short. It keeps them in a very manageable third down situation. I think the last few years when Dallas has gotten a little bit of pass happy, it's gotten them into a little bit of trouble. Because the offense, even with the talent that they had at wide receiver, Dak did not look his best when they were super pass happy. So when they've gotten back to that run game, last week he looked very good. In the first half, especially, they were keeping third and minimal. He was able to really pick the Bears defense apart. So I think that's very crucial to stay balanced, even though it can be so easy to, like you said, trick yourself into thinking that you can pass a little bit more than you really need to. But yeah, I definitely think that running the football is definitely priority number one. Just to add on to the defense, I do think that keeping Aaron Rodgers under pressure is going to be a huge key. If they let him sit back there for five plus seconds, even with him not playing his best, he's still one of the top QBs right now. And if you give any QB time, regardless of how mediocre the wide receiver room is, the longer he's upright and scanning the field, he's going to find somebody. And he has the arm talent to fit the football in the windows that not many people can. So definitely want to keep him thinking about the pass rush more than trying to find that second read, third read. So that's definitely another key for me. And then also I just think that another key for them is to win special teams, because the Packers have been a team that have struggled in special teams. That's been their Achilles heel, especially last season, the playoffs, where they gave up that block punt to the 49ers, and that really ended up costing them the game. And they had a similar scenario this year where they gave up a block punt as well. That cost them another game. So I think that if we can, even get a punt return, this is a game that Turpin might break one for a touchdown, or even getting a block punt or blocked field goal or something to that caliber. I think if we can win there, that will be also a crucial kind of key to victory. I don't know if that third one, that's more of like a bonus. I don't know how much that would really apply to this game with just the talent there. I think there's such a talent jump between the Cowboys roster and the Packers roster this season. I don't think it might get to that third aspect of the game. I don't really think so, but that's just kind of another additional thing to where if this game does end up being close, winning the special teams is probably going to be that part of the game that gets the Cowboys over the hump.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the both of you. And the two that have not been said yet, just get turnovers. The Packers are -5 turnover differential, which is second to last. So if, like Ray, you said, if Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, Dante Fowler, whoever, if they're able to get in his face, it's more than likely that it's gonna end in a defensive player's hands. And also, I know that Dak normally has clean games. I've stated that he probably has one or two throws every game that probably get away from him a little too much. And the Packers are the second. They allow the second to last amount of passing yards at 170.6, and the Cowboys are fourth in the fourth to last in passing yards. So hopefully Dak will have to take advantage of all of his opportunities. And hopefully Pollard and Zeke, if Zeke does play, they're both able to allow Dak to go off play action, because Dak is at his best on PA rollouts or just any bootlegs, any type of play action play is when he's really able to just dice or carve up the defense. And those are, and also score touchdowns. Dallas, I don't think so much this year, but years past when they've gotten in the red zone, it more than likely ends in a field goal. And Ray, neither of us have talked about this at all, but Brett Maher has been really, really, I don't know what he did in the offseason, but he's a completely different kicker than the Brett Maher we saw years ago. And I think that we're all very fortunate to have this version of Maher. So hopefully Dallas can just score touchdowns whenever they're in the red zone, and just have a relatively clean game. I think that if you give Rodgers any type of penalty, I know that Rodgers, against at least once every Dallas game, he catches Dallas in a change from players on and off the field. He just loves to do that more than any other quarterback I've watched. And so he'll probably get Dallas because I think he takes pride in it, because I think he's done it every game. So hopefully Dan Quinn is just able to minimize that. But just hopefully a clean game in all three phases is what I think. What I'm looking to happen.
Yeah. In regards to the Brett Maher comment, yeah, I do agree with him improving, and he's really, when that's one of the positions where if they're doing well, you don't really think about it. It's when the kicker is missing field goals, that's when there's a little cause for pause. You start. I know for me, especially back when David Bueller was kicking for the Dallas Cowboys, I would always think I know it's 4th and 4, we're at our own 40, or we're at our, the opponent's 42, 43, but maybe we should go for it because Maher is probably not going to make this field goal. So, when you have a field goal kicker that's super consistent and drilling field goals from long range, I know he missed a couple from 60 plus, but I'm not going to hold that very against him. That's a hard kick for anyone to make unless they're Justin Tucker. So it's very nice to be in a situation where our kicker is not costing us games.
Yeah, those are his only misses still, right? One from 59, and
yeah, it was a ridiculous.
I think so.
Yeah, it was. I think that was more just we'll see what happens here.
I think maybe one was blocked too. I think maybe one was tipped, and then the other he just kind of missed from 63, 64.
Yeah, it was. I was surprised that they even let him walk out there. But I would like the both of you to give me your score prediction and any type of bold prediction you think is going to happen or that you want to see. So, Mario, you can go first.
Well, like I mentioned a couple of times already, the Packers are reeling. And I think there's one of those things where the thread just keeps unraveling and it doesn't get stopped. And nothing is getting better for them, especially with the injuries that they're experiencing. and they just don't have the guys to step up. They don't have the talent to match up with Dallas. I don't think home field advantage is going to be much of an advantage for them. I think the Cowboys are going to come and run the ball down their throats. Um, whether Zeke plays or not, I don't think it matters. Cowboys are going to win this something like 28-12, let's say. I don't think Packers get into the end zone. They just don't have the personnel. As far as my bold prediction, I think Pollard sets another career high in rushing yards. 131 was what he said versus the Bears. I think he gets up over 140 this game.
Yeah,
that is bold.
If he sets another career high, I don't think my fantasy team that I have at with my fraternity brothers up at school, I don't think that my team would really like that because I just traded for Ezekiel Elliott. So not having him shoved out of the lineup for Dallas back to that 2 spot would not be very beneficial for me, I think. But I mean, and regardless of my fantasy woes, I would definitely want to see him do well because he definitely has that burst that a lot of his fans have been longing from Zeke. Zeke hasn't really doesn't have Pollard's burst, and even last week, Pollard was able to get breakaway runs that Zeke would just cannot give us anymore. So I definitely would like to see him do that because that would mean that our running game is it would get taken up to definitely a different level. But I'm pretty much with you on your prediction of regarding the personnel. I know earlier on when Owen and I were talking about this briefly, I was on the same wavelength of the Cowboys are they're gonna blow them out. They're so much better than the Packers this year. Aaron Rodgers is not playing well. He doesn't have the receivers that should scare Trayvon Diggs or Anthony Brown. But I've been thinking about it, and the one thing that kind of has been sticking with me is like the teams that are the most beaten down, injured, like they're the most dangerous. Really at this point, the Packers don't have very much to. They're kind of at the floor right now. Like they haven't been this far. They haven't been this down bad in a long time. Even with the final years of the Mike McCarthy era, they never lost 5 straight games. I don't think Aaron Rodgers has lost 4 straight games in his career. So they're at this point where they can really only go up from here. So I do think they're dangerous. This could be considered kind of a trap game, kind of like that Denver game where the Cowboys just weren't ready to play and they just got absolutely annihilated. Because really, any given Sunday, any team can beat anybody. But I don't think that will happen. I just think it's something to kind of look out for. I have the Cowboys winning by 14. I'm gonna say 31 to. I guess it would be 17. Yeah, 17. 31-17. And my bold prediction, I'm going to say that CeeDee Lamb gets his first 200-yard receiving game.
Ooh.
Well, if we're going off that, the Packers only average 170 against their defense, so this would be like catastrophic, like fire everyone. Mario, you and I are very close in score prediction. I'm 27-13, and I do think that Pollard will have another good game. I don't know if he'll have quite what he did have last week, but hopefully because for whatever reason the running back coach was like, yeah, he was tired and all that, and I didn't really get that. I didn't think that was something that should have been said in front of the media. But I think that my bold prediction is that Dak does have his first, I believe his first 300 passing game of the season. I don't think he's had one this year yet. And I think that would be good. It'd be a good way to walk into next week against the Vikings and then a bunch of AFC South teams. I think. Yeah, the South.
Yeah, I don't know if Owen has told you about our records. We we pick the Cowboys game every week, and he's picked against the Cowboys pretty much every week. So I think he's on his best behavior. I was expecting him to take the Packers, but I think since you're here, he had to be on his best behavior and actually pick the Cowboys, not look like a total hater. But I'm glad he did pick the Cowboys, so he doesn't drop to 1-8 and be even further behind. We're still working on what the loser has to do. We haven't figured that out yet, so he's at the point now where it's just like the Packers. He's in a very must win scenario.
I'm tanking for a draft pick.
I saw those records and I meant to ask. So you're 6-2, and I figured, well, Cowboys are 6-2. That's probably what that means. Like, what does that 1-7 mean? Does that mean the Yankees versus Astros?
Yeah.
Oh.
That's
wow. I give us like 4 years when all of their 15-year-old prospects decide to walk back in. Just give us some time. But to back myself up from this terrible pick performance, I just thought that I thought that after Dak went down, I thought that was kind of the end of the year. I did not think Cooper Rush, his rookie year, he had a really good preseason. People were like, oh yeah, like Dak 2.0. And then Ray and I both said that the quarterback that looked the best this past preseason was Ben DiNucci. And I was kind of surprised that Dallas opted to cut him. And I was pleasantly surprised with Cooper Rush's play, but it was very surprising, to say the least. But
well, I'm with you on that front as far as expecting the worst when your quarterback goes down, because prior to this season, what proof has there been that the Cowboys can recover from an injury like that? Every time Romo got hurt, the season was over. Everybody knew it. They couldn't pick up the slack in other areas of the game, and they are doing it this year, and I think that's what makes this team special.
Yeah, and I mean, when we were talking about it earlier. The reason why I think is just of how great the defense has been, and really the Cowboys. In past season when Romo went down, I know back in 2010 when he went down. I mean, they didn't have the defensive side of the ball to back them up. I mean, John Kitna was okay, but they weren't. They lacked that edge at quarterback to where they could kind of combat a mediocre to below average defense. But I mean, this year their defense is pretty much 1 or 2 in every category, and then they're really only asking Cooper Rush to make 1 or 2 plays a game or have 2 or 3 drives a game, and he was able to do that. So I just kind of had a feeling while everyone was kind of the season's over that they could stay afloat, especially having the Giants and Washington on the schedule early, and they had one other team in there that I thought that they could maybe get away with a win. So I thought even if they could survive and get to, I thought they were going to come out of that 7-game stretch at 3-4. So I was over the moon when they got out there at 5-2 or whatever it was.
Yep.
Yeah, that was.
But yeah, in regards to Owen, I would let you off the hook, but you did take the Lions and then the Bears. So I mean, you kind of
that was
you kind of fell. You got to you plunged. You were teetering on the cliff, and then you jumped off the cliff, picking those two teams.
Well, the Lions, I think we did that before Swift was called out, and at that point Dallas's defense really couldn't even stop a nosebleed, and Swift is one, and that was also because the Lions had given up only like less than 5 or 6 sacks, and Dallas, they feast on sacks, and we haven't really seen Dallas been able to. They haven't been in a game where they really haven't been able to get a lot of sacks, so that's what I was kind of hoping for. And the Bears game, it looked for a little bit that, obviously not for when Dallas scored 4 touchdowns in a row, but later when they kind of went dead, and then Justin Fields, who has really asserted himself as one of the better young quarterbacks based off of his last 2 performances, and hopefully he's able to pick it up with his arm. I just thought that it was going to be too much, and then I was wrong. But like I said before, we're in rebuild, and we're going to get a good draft pick, and then walk in the next year and be better. So Mario, for going back to what I said earlier about the Tyron Smith, hopefully he's about a month out. Ray or I have gotten into a few Twitter discussions about this, and in the beginning or a few weeks ago, I was before this was really we even thought about Tyron coming back. I was like very pro keep Tyler Smith left tackle, but Duke Mayweather, who coaches about like every offensive lineman in the league, even he talked about how Tyler should really move back in. And who am I to disagree with Duke Mayweather? So, what are your thoughts on how the offensive line should move around? And also, after you answer that, where do you see this season, or how far do you think the Cowboys are going to be able to make it this season?
Well, as far as Tyron Smith, so we saw this situation not on the same level with Prescott and Romo, right? So Tyler Smith he's taken his lumps, but he's overall been solid, and the arrow is pointing upwards. So it's really difficult to pull him from that spot in favor of a 13-year vet who is coming off a major injury, right? But on the other side of the coin, I think Tyron Smith deserves the chance to prove that he can't do it anymore, right? But that's a little tricky because one time he gets beat, we've seen it happen to Romo several times. One hit and he's done, right? We could see that happen with Prescott, and we definitely do not want that. So if you look at the way that the team scope is and the way that they like to do things, I think it's sort of a youth movement. And if Tyron comes back, I think he comes back as a swing tackle, and they just leave Tyler Smith at left tackle to continue to develop into the player that he's becoming. So before the season, I had the Cowboys at finishing 12-5. I didn't really look into the playoffs because I think they can truly believe this team can go the distance just by what they've shown us in the first half of this season, and how they don't need to be reliant on strictly the arm of their quarterback. But it is also about matchups, and I definitely do not want to see the 49ers again. Honestly, I probably would not want to see the Bears again. I think we can handle the Eagles. I don't want to say that they don't deserve their 8-0 record that they have, but strictly looking at the second half of the game that we played against them on the road and almost coming all the way back without our QB1, I definitely think we're going to win the Christmas Eve matchup, and it would just be poetic to meet them again in the playoffs, and I would not be afraid to play that team. So, like I said, in the playoffs, it's all about matchups, and I think the teams that give us the most problems are the teams who are smash mouth running teams, because they control the clock and keep our offense off the field. And also, just from the way things have looked this season, the mobile quarterbacks. Justin Fields is doing it to everybody. He didn't just do it to us. I mean, he just set a record this past week for single game rushing yards for a quarterback with 178. Jalen Hurts and the short passing game was really working against us, so he didn't have to run too much, but he is capable of doing it. We know that. So, of course, I want my Cowboys to go to the Super Bowl. I want them to win it. I just think it's to be determined in how the seeding shakes out and what teams from the NFC actually make it into the tournament.
Yeah, for sure. I do agree with your second statement. I think Ray and I talked about it earlier, where the 49ers, after last year, or after last postseason game, I think that Dallas will probably have its easiest matchup if they go against a pass heavy offense. I'm not saying it's like it'll be an easy win, but I think they'll have a better opportunity. And Ray, I know that you were not a fan of the Tyler Smith pick. I remember that was probably the worst case scenario for a lot of fans. But for whatever reason, there were a bunch of people that thought that was going to be the pick, and you were not a fan. So, what do you think, or what would you like to see happen if Tyron Smith does come back, or when he does come back in December?
Yeah, I definitely, I'm very, very okay with being wrong, and as of today, I have been very wrong on Tyler Smith. I think I was very frustrated with that selection. I really wanted them to take Jermaine Johnson. They did not end up doing that, and I mean, the jury's still out on how that will turn out for both teams. But as of right now, I think the Cowboys have gotten a little bit more out of Tyler Smith than the Jets have with Jermaine Johnson. Even though the Jets are also surprisingly in a really good spot. But I think what really bothered me even more than them taking Tyler Smith was the fact that they were having him start off his career. Their plan was to have him at in the interior at guard. Um, I remember. I mean, we had a lot of Owen and I. We had a lot of conversations on that decision. And my main thing was, why are you having him learn a completely new position and stunning his growth on the outside when your plan is to eventually replace Tyron Smith? I mean, even if he has to sit or play swing tackle. I mean, I didn't really understand him going through the entire offseason, learning a different position. And of course, right on schedule as it has, the last 5-6 years with Tyron Smith, he got nicked up, got hurt, missed time, and all of a sudden Tyler Smith was back out there at left tackle. And I know they went and got Jason Peters because they did expect what I expected, Tyler Smith to struggle. And while he has had his growing pains and has missed assignments, has had some penalty issues, he's definitely been a lot better than I thought. And I think that, bringing with Tyron Smith coming back, going back to it is. I do agree with your analogy with the Romo Dak situation. I think it's that's the perfect scenario where you have a guy who, Romo has and will be always my favorite Dallas Cowboy player. But I mean, I am willing to admit that every time, those last 2-3 years, or even really since 2010, he had something going on, whether it was ribs, collarbone, whatever it was, hand. He had something wrong, or back for sure. But he had so many injuries. He was always one hit away from hurting his collarbone or back. And it's the same thing with Tyron Smith. He makes one bad move, rolled ankle, pulled hamstring, if he lands wrong, hurt back, hurt neck, something like that. So I do think that if they can utilize Tyron Smith in a way where they're not having to, where Tyler Smith is not being hurt with reps, I think definitely do that. But I would definitely want them to stick with Tyler Smith on the outside. I think the worst case scenario, and I would not be surprised if the Cowboys did this because it would be a typical Cowboys move, is to put Tyron Smith at left tackle and move Tyler Smith back into a guard position. That is the last thing I want to see. But I would not be surprised if the Cowboys pulled something like that. But I definitely think that Tyler Smith should stay on the outside. You should pat, Tyron Smith on the back, say, you did great for us these last 10 years that you've been playing. We really appreciate it, but you guys sit this one out, pal. And just kind of go on from there. But as for the overall, my thoughts on where they can go, I had the Cowboys going 10-7 just because I thought the beginning of their schedule, they were going to have a lot of collateral. They were going to have a lot of damage early on, and that was when I thought even Dak was going to play because, they had the Bucs, which they did end up losing. They had the Bengals who were in the Super Bowl, and then the Rams who were in the Super Bowl. So I marked those down early on as all 3 losses. I think we caught the Bengals at the perfect time. The Rams have just turned out to be a total shell of themselves that they were the year prior. So, it was just kind of the luck of the draw that we got those teams in the position that they are now. We were able to pick up 2 wins there. And then I mean, we're at the point where really our two losses are against Philly, and Philly, they're they're the last undefeated team standing, and then the Bucks, who had Tom Brady. So, I mean, we have pretty much a cakewalk coming in. Not to underestimate anybody, but having the Jaguars coming in, Washington again, the Colts, who I had a lot of faith in early on, who have very disappointed me. I think that we are able to pencil in the Colts as a W at this point, and then also I'm forgetting some of the Texans and the Jaguars.
Yeah.
So I mean, they can pencil in 4 wins, I think, from those 4, and that would immediately put them in the double-digit column. So I do think that 11-6, 12-5, maybe even 13-4 are possibilities for this team. But I'm kind of with you. It's all about the matchup. The NFC is a lot weaker this year. I mean, typically we're looking towards the playoffs at this point. Like, all right, it would be a really shame if we drew the Packers because Aaron Rodgers beats us every time. It would be a shame if we drew the 49ers because we can't stop the run. It would be a shame if we drew the Rams because the Rams are they're the Super Bowl champs. That's what I kind of expected to be thinking. But at this point, the best team, I think, is the 49ers, and I don't even think they're above 500 at this point. Maybe that one game above. I think they're 500 right now. And after that, I mean, the Bucks, I think, will end up making it just because that division is so bad. I wouldn't mind playing the Bucks. Wouldn't mind playing the Bucks again. Usually, I would not bet against Tom Brady, but I mean, this year is just kind of a little bit of a different story. I mean, typically, I'm a very pessimistic Cowboys fan just because it's the worst has happened so often since I've been supporting them. I do think that unless the Cowboys draw the 49ers in the first round, I think they're at least going to make it to the second round, depending on who they draw at that point. Determines on if they're going to make the NFC Championship game. I definitely think this is the best chance they have at making the Super Bowl. I don't think that they're at the point where they could win one this year, even though this is kind of that window where, I mean, after this year, they're going to lose a lot of guys, as we've kind of talked about, a lot of guys on free agency or are going to be free agents. So I'm going to be conservative with my pick and say a wild card playoff win and a divisional exit, but I definitely would not be surprised if they were representing the NFC or one of the two teams representing in the NFC for that title game.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the both of you. And my take on Tyron is that Brian Broaddus talked about how if for whatever reason, if Dallas cuts or trades Tyron, that'll probably be the end of his career. Just because he's been a Cowboy for so long. So hopefully they keep him in whatever role he is in. He stays that way. But do the either of y'all have anything you want to say before we wrap it up?
I do not, but I'd like to hear your prediction for the end of the year, Owen.
I'm with the both of y'all. It honestly depends on where they lie, who they draw. I thought that the Eagles were going to win the division pretty easily just based off of their strength of schedule and getting AJ Brown. We'll see. Like Mario mentioned, they're a pretty hard second half team, and then they're the best team in the league in the second quarter. So if Dallas, like all of us mentioned, if Dallas keeps on playing the way that they're currently playing, and if the Packers, because the Packers haven't really beat a great team yet, like a lot of the other powerhouses in the NFL have. So the Eagles, they may go up against a great team and beat them, and then we may sit here and just not really have much hope. But until we get to that point, I do think that Dallas has a pretty good chance to at least do something. I don't know what, but do something.
Yeah, I guess I have one quick thing. I do want to touch on one thing in regards to the Eagles. I do think that, I mean, Jalen Hurts is still a little bit underrated. I'm one of his. I mean, I didn't think he was that great. to begin with. That might just mean the Baylor blood in me and how much I just despise Jalen Hurts. But I do think that the addition of AJ Brown has worked wonders for him in his development. Having a consistent number one who has really been made huge strides the last couple of weeks in the passing game, and it's allowed Devonta Smith to kind of be that number two. And really, I think that they're dangerous in the passing game and very easy to be overlooked in that regard. And then also, with their running, they've always been, or not always been, but they've really prioritized their running attack. And Jalen Hurts is one of those quarterbacks to where he's a lot more. You don't expect him to get nicked up running the football as you would a Justin Fields or even like a Tua or even Trey Lance, because of just how durable he is. And with the amount of work he puts in the offseason to just kind of bulk up and be able to take hits. So I do think that if we were to draw the Eagles in the postseason, it would be a very dangerous game for both teams just because of the rivalry, and really it could go either way, I think. So, I mean, if we were to draw the I don't even know, maybe the Vikings in the wild card round, I think we would be able to get past them just because Kirk Cousins, other than against the Saints, hasn't really shown that he's the type of quarterback to get it done in the postseason. And then if we were to go into the divisional round in Philly, in the divisional playoff game, that would be a very interesting matchup and a really exciting matchup. I think that probably would be the matchup that I would want the most in the divisional round, for a chance to go to our first conference title in 25 plus years, I think it is now.
Well, I do agree with you, Ray. But we both wanted to thank you, Mario, again for taking time to come on and share your thoughts, and it's been a pleasure. I know that we've been trying to do this for the past few weeks, and we're just thankful that Dak Prescott was able to come back, and the bye week came when it came. But thank you again. Tell everyone where they can find you on Twitter.
Well, thank you guys for having me on, man. I had a lot of fun talking Cowboys football with y'all, and you're right. Thankfully, Prescott was back so we could talk about something positive. But you guys, you can find me on Twitter. My Twitter handle's right here, Mario Powers Up. We're sort of on a little hiatus. Our producer's gotten really busy with life and work and stuff, so we haven't recorded in a couple of weeks. But if you guys want to go check out the Talking Boys with the Boys podcast, we're on all major platforms. We got a YouTube channel, Talking Boys with the Boys. We have a Facebook page, Talking Boys with the Boys, a TikTok account, Talking Boys with the Boys. So we're all over the place. You can find us anywhere that your social media desires lead you to. You can find Talking Boys with the Boys. So we appreciate anybody goes and listens, subscribes, likes, all that good stuff.
That's awesome. Being able to have so many platforms, we're very lucky as, I guess you could say, content producers, that we're able to have so many outlets. But go Cowboys! Thank y'all for meeting, and hopefully Dallas is able to be able to stun Aaron for the first time since 2016.
Yeah.
Go Cowboys, y'all.
Yeah, go Cowboys. Thanks for hanging out with us, Mario. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Go Cowboys. Thanks again, guys.